We will pick up with our discussion of media use by talking about a few different controversies that surround teenagers' use of various types of media. The first thing I want to talk about, as you might guess, is the belief that watching violent television or playing violent video games might cause people to behave more aggressively. This is actually a huge area of research in the field right now. And over the past few decades, we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the answer to this question is. Although there is violent media consumed by people of all ages, we know that most violent crimes are committed by males between the age of 15 and 25. And in fact, most violent media is also marketed at this age range, which is one reason, or two reasons rather, we've chose to focus our research on these age groups. And we've found inconsistent findings. There's a lot of different ways we've gone about trying to answer this question through longitudinal research, correlational studies, and shorter term in-lab experiments. And although some research has found a small, very short-term effect of violent media use increasing aggression, and other research has found correlations, it still remains very unclear. It does not at this point seem like watching violent television or playing a violent video game is going to take a person who isn't violent and make them a violent person. That's just not how this looks like it works. With the correlational research, you need to keep in mind that people who are predisposed to being aggressive, who are already aggressive, might be more likely to choose to play violent video games or watch violent things in TVs or movies. Of course, there's many non-aggressive people who also enjoy this type of media, but that relationship could account for some of the correlations between media use and behavior. I also want you to keep in mind that some of the in-lab experiments have used methods that don't necessarily equate to the real-world way that we use media. For example, some studies of violent media have measured violence by measuring how much hot sauce a participant wants to put on a cracker that they're giving to another person. If playing a violent video game makes you more likely to put more hot sauce on a cracker that you're going to have an opponent eat, that might be slightly more aggressive, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go out and start engaging in harmful, aggressive behaviors towards other people. So it is a very important area of research and one that I'm sure will continue, but at this point in time, it doesn't seem that watching violent video games playing or watching violent television shows, playing violent video games has any substantial impact on behavior. Another controversy that I want to mention is that of different types of music. It seems today that the category of music that people are concerned about is hip hop or rap. We know that most generations have their controversial music. Jazz was controversial, rock and roll was controversial, heavy metal was controversial, and today's topic of interest is hip hop music. People who are concerned with listening to hip hop, which traces back to the 70s in New York City before becoming more popular in the 80s, criticize it for emphasizing and even sensationalizing violence and for objectification of women. So, research has looked to see whether or not there is a relationship between listening to hip hop and engaging in these outcomes. And of course, there's been very little evidence to support these criticisms. And what is there, again, is correlational. So it could be that for the people that do show a correlation between listening to hip hop and maybe objectification of women, already objectified women before they started listening to hip hop. So, not a lot of evidence to support or to further our concerns about listening to this specific topic of music. And in fact, hip hop has been used as therapy for certain adolescents and emerging adults dealing with psychological issues. I also want to mention that there is a very wide variety of hip hop, and hip hop has changed a lot over time. So kind of a messy puzzle to try to put together when it comes to figuring out what the actual outcomes are of an entire genre of music that's been around for many decades now. But again, we do know that it can be used in some cool ways to help deal with psychological problems. The last controversy that I want to mention as we begin to discuss what media use is going to look like in the future is, of course, social media. As I'm sure we're all aware, people have concerns that social media use is going to worsen our social skills, make us incapable of having real-world face-to-face interactions. Social media use has also been used to bullying or cyberbullying and has raised concerns about anxiety and depression among adolescents. And while these are all very real concerns, and it is a bit too early to know for sure, so far we haven't found much evidence to support these concerns. We have, however, found that adolescents and emerging adults often report feeling like they wish they could unplug, leave their cell phone at home one day, not watch TV, or even have their friends put their phones away when they are hanging out face to face. So it does seem like there are some concerns, things we need to pay attention to, or maybe new norms that we could introduce to help kind of mitigate some of the potential negative effects of social media. But social media itself might not necessarily be as concerning when it comes to adolescent and emerging adult development as we might have thought. Again, you'll have to stay tuned to find out as we battle the ever-changing battleground that is different types of social media and the impacts they may or may not have on us. The last thing I want to mention is the relationship between media in general and globalization. You may or may not be aware that the level of interconnection between different countries and different cultures and different parts of the world has led to sharing media, where a show that becomes popular in one country might go viral and spread to another country, where, for example, K-pop becomes really popular in Korea and then spreads to America. So one of the globalized products that we have going back and forth between different cultures and groups of people right now is our media. And we know that sharing media actually promotes globalization. For example, we know that more traditional cultures that have been exposed to Western media have adopted less traditional gender roles. So teenagers in these communities aren't as likely to support traditional gender roles once more westernized media is introduced to their community. We also see more Western approaches to dating. Remember when we talked about differences in dating rituals and practices between different cultures? And a preoccupation with Western beauty standards, which has been connected with eating disorders. So some of these things that we're sharing might have some negative outcomes, might create some tension between generations, but what we do know is that, again, media is created specifically to pique our interest, to hold our attention, and to entertain us. And that seems to be true in many regards, regardless of what country or culture we're from. So media perhaps could be the shared language of the future.